Imagine a world where innocence is a lie, where the bright eyes of a child can conceal a mind as cold and calculating as any monster of history. You are about to step into that world. The story begins in the raw, bleeding heart of the American frontier Deadwood, South Dakota, 1876. A town carved from greed and gold, a place where law is a suggestion and violence is a currency. Here, death is familiar, almost banal. The first cemetery fills faster than new lives arrive, and the streets are slick with mud, sweat, and the shadow of human cruelty. Into this crucible of chaos comes a boy, 10 years old, smaller than his peers, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, a ghost among the living. Thomas Canfield, or so the world would call him. He carries no family, no warmth, only a precision in his gaze that unsettles those around him. His eyes, a strange pale gray, seem to peer not at you, but through you, measuring, cataloging, calculating. There is no plea for comfort, no hint of fear or sorrow. He speaks only in short, measured words, as if emotion were a foreign language he had studied from afar. In a town obsessed with survival, where children are exploited in mines and mills, Thomas is unremarkable at first glance. Yet beneath that fragile frame lies something profoundly unnatural. A mind that has begun to understand anatomy through curiosity, dissection, and, eventually, murder. Before he turns 12, before he is even a man, he will commit acts that will haunt a town already numb to horror. He studies, observes, and learns each death a lesson in the structure of life, in the fragility of the human body, in the quiet thrill of exerting power over life itself. This is not the story of a boy gone astray. It is a glimpse into the mechanics of a mind untouched by empathy, nurtured in the shadows of a lawless society. What makes Thomas terrifying is not just what he does, but how he does it methodically, clinically, with a calm that freezes the soul. He is a lesson in the hidden darkness of human nature, a mirror reflecting the violence we refuse to name in ourselves. Tonight, I will guide you through his world, through the alleys of Deadwood, through the butcher shop where his hands first learned precision, where life and death became a game of calculation. Listen closely, because what you are about to hear is not folklore or legend, it is the anatomy of a psychopathic mind. And by the end, you may find that part of it lives within you. The streets of Deadwood are alive with chaos, but not the kind of chaos that simply entertains. This is the kind that seeps into the bones, reshapes morality, and trains the young to survive or to dominate. Picture it. Narrow alleys pressed between pine-covered hills, mud streets that turn into rivers when rain falls, and a population swelling faster than any law can keep pace. Gold has drawn them here, but it is desperation, vice, and human cruelty that define the town. Murder is ordinary, theft a pastime, and yet amid this, a strange, unspoken order persists. Men respect power, and children, though small, are expected to find their own way. Thomas arrives, alone, claiming the death of his father in some distant collapse, and no one bothers to verify. Deadwood swallows orphan children whole, and Thomas steps into that hunger like a predator born to it. He is placed in the care of a widow named Constance Pritchard, a woman hardened by loss, running an orphan placement ledger that is more inventory than record of life. She asks him questions. Can he work? Any trade skills? Thomas answers flatly. He taught me how things come apart, how they fit together inside. The casual phrasing is chilling. To her, it is grief. To him, it is a statement of intent. He is assigned to Garrett Hollis' butcher shop, a man of muscle and practicality, accustomed to the brutal rhythms of cutting, cleaving, and preserving life. Thomas watches. He does not flinch. He observes the structure beneath the flesh, the anatomy revealed by every practiced stroke of the knife. Most children would recoil. Thomas leans in. Each movement of Hollis' cleaver becomes a lesson, each layer of meat a textbook. In this environment, violence is normalized, death is routine, and the boy's fascination finds fertile soil. But consider this, not all knowledge is innocent. Some knowledge seeds a darkness that cannot be undone. Thomas is not learning merely to survive. He is learning to master, to control. The town does not notice because the mechanisms of power, of law, of social structure are so weak that they cannot see the subtle predator emerging among them. The boy is alone in his mind but perfectly tuned to the rhythms of the world around him. Every child who vanishes, every unexplained accident, they are data points in a pattern only he can see. And here lies the forbidden truth. Environments shape morality. Chaos can cultivate monsters. Order can hide them. But when innocence is weaponized by circumstance, and curiosity is coupled with absence of empathy, you do not get a wayward child, you get an architect of horror, a mind that will study, dissect, and execute without hesitation. Deadwood provides both the textbook and the playground, and Thomas is reading every page. By now, you must ask yourself, in a world where most adults turn away from brutality, where children are made to obey, could one of these children become a master of death before even reaching adolescence? Thomas Canfield proves it. Now, imagine a mind that views flesh as architecture, life as a puzzle to be solved. Thomas Canfield is no longer merely observing. He begins to act. His first acts of violence are small, almost imperceptible, a missing animal here, a minor experiment there, but each is deliberate, each a rehearsal for something far darker. By the age of 10, he has learned what most men never comprehend: that fear can be measured, controlled, manipulated. He studies reaction, tests limits, and catalogs results with the cold efficiency of a surgeon. In Deadwood, children vanish with frightening regularity. Illness, accident, or simple misfortune are convenient explanations. No one notices patterns where patterns are dangerous, where intent is invisible behind innocence. Thomas exploits this, moving among the orphans and laborers with a quiet precision. He is friendly enough, helpful enough, until the moment he needs to be otherwise. The psychological control he exerts is subtle. The right word, the right glance, the perfect pause. He learns that domination does not always require brute force. Sometimes it is patience, observation, and timing that wield the deadliest power. He selects his victims methodically, choosing children who will not be missed immediately, children whose absence will ripple slowly, unnoticed at first, then felt only when it is too late. He experiments with anatomy, with movement, with cause and effect. Each act is a lesson in control. Each death a confirmation of his growing mastery over life itself. The butcher shop becomes his laboratory, the streets of Deadwood his observation deck. The boy who once watched from the shadows now begins to orchestrate events with meticulous care. And here is the secret most will never speak aloud. The mind that can commit murder without remorse does not awaken suddenly. It is forged in environment, in neglect, in exposure to human cruelty. Thomas's psychopathy is nurtured, honed by a world that normalizes violence and rewards cunning. By the time he confesses, he speaks with the precision of someone detailing a craft. There is no remorse, only the clinical satisfaction of one who understands that life is fragile, fleeting, and ultimately manipulable. This is where most people stop seeing the lesson. It is not the murders themselves that terrify, but the revelation that monsters are not always external. Sometimes they emerge from the very society that claims to be civilized. Deadwood is more than a town. It is a mirror, reflecting what happens when law, morality, and empathy are optional, when the young are left to navigate a world structured by power, and when curiosity meets opportunity. By the end of this descent, you will begin to see the pattern, the mechanism by which a child becomes an instrument of fear, a case study in controlled chaos. And before we continue, I want you to do something. In the comments below, write the phrase, "I see the darkness twice." Not as a game, but as a recognition, a locking of identity. You are stepping into the world few dare to witness, and the act of naming it solidifies your awareness. Step closer, because this is where the veneer of childhood disappears entirely. The butcher shop on Main Street, Garrett Hollis Domain, is no longer a place of mere labor. For Thomas, it becomes a laboratory, a cathedral of anatomy, and a classroom in human control. Every slab of meat, every pig, every severed joint is a lesson in structure, precision, and detachment. He watches the lines between muscle and bone, the arcs of incision, the mechanics of separation, and he absorbs it as though the world itself were revealing its blueprint. Hollis sees only diligence. Deadwood sees only labor. Neither perceives the transformation occurring in the small, pale boy who moves among the carcasses with unwavering attention. Thomas's education in cruelty is silent, invisible to anyone not attuned to the subtle rhythms of predation. He mimics what he sees, practices when no one is watching, experiments with timing and technique. The moral boundaries of life are irrelevant here. The boy is learning something far deeper: mastery over flesh, over fear, over consequence itself. And yet, it is not just the physical that he perfects. The psychological game is even more intricate. Thomas begins to probe the children of Deadwood, watching reactions, noting patterns. A slight tremor of fear, a hesitation in speech, the twitch of muscle, all of it is data. He learns to bend others' perceptions without touching them, to anticipate resistance, to manipulate curiosity and trust. By the time his first human victim falls, the act is not clumsy or impulsive. It is calculated, rehearsed, and clinical. This is the hidden truth most cannot face. Evil is learned, nurtured, and practiced. It does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, observing, measuring, perfecting. Deadwood provides anonymity, opportunity, and a society too fractured to notice. The unspoken rules of frontier life, survival, cunning, ruthlessness become the framework in which Thomas's mind flourishes. The boy's body may be small, but his command over life and death is growing exponentially. By 11, the pattern is clear. The killings are not random. The boy has adopted a system: selection, observation, execution, and refinement. Each event increases his confidence. Each act of control fuels the next. There is no empathy, no hesitation, only the precision of a mind that has understood the fragility of others and the potency of its own will. And now, understand this: what you are witnessing is not just history. It is a blueprint, a mirror of the hidden mechanisms by which power and control are exercised over life itself. What is terrifying is how close this pattern is to the human capacity for domination. Consider it carefully. You are learning to see what most refuse to acknowledge, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. This is where the descent becomes undeniable. By the age of 10, Thomas Canfield moves from observation to action, and what unfolds is not the chaotic violence of impulse, but the meticulous orchestration of murder. His first victims are children, small, vulnerable, and largely invisible to a town already numb to death. Deadwood's chaos is his cover, its lawlessness his shield. He does not stumble into evil. He studies it, plans it, executes it with the cold efficiency of someone who has learned that life is pliable and death is a tool. The methods he employs are chilling in their precision. He understands anatomy not from books, but from hands-on experience with flesh, from hours spent in the butcher shop, and from the careful observation of the weak and the unsuspecting. A misstep could reveal him, so he practices patience. Timing becomes as important as technique. He watches, waits, and then strikes with a methodical rhythm that leaves no trace of hesitation. By the time the town recognizes something is wrong, the boy has already moved on, lessons in control deeply embedded in every act. What is crucial to understand is not just what he does, but why he is terrifying. It is the absence of emotion. There is no thrill, no outburst, no frenzy, only calculation, study, and execution. The act of killing becomes a form of mastery, an intimate dialogue with the mechanics of life and death. Each victim teaches him something new, each pattern of response another variable to control. He is an architect, a student of terror, a boy whose mind has mapped a territory most adults cannot comprehend. And this is the most dangerous aspect. Thomas's brilliance is inseparable from his sociopathy. The more he learns, the more skilled he becomes at predicting the responses of others. He is always 3 steps ahead, aware of every loophole, every weakness, every distraction. The town's chaos becomes his laboratory, its apathy his cloak. The unthinkable becomes routine because he has structured it, rehearsed it, and internalized it as a natural law. This is where you must pause and confront an uncomfortable truth. Monsters are rarely born fully formed. They are shaped by neglect, opportunity, and environment. They are nurtured by silence, by chaos, by the absence of accountability. Deadwood is not a backdrop. It is an accomplice, offering lessons in lawlessness, trust in none, and survival through control. If you are still with me, write in the comments, "I see the darkness twice again." Not for show, not for attention, but to affirm that you are acknowledging this truth. You are stepping further into understanding what it takes for a mind, even a child's, to master death without remorse. Now, we reach the point where Thomas Canfield is no longer merely a child in a violent town. He becomes an agent of terror, a silent orchestrator whose presence alone reshapes the behaviors of those around him. Deadwood is a town built on chaos, but even chaos has patterns, and Thomas begins to exploit them. He understands that fear, anticipation, and uncertainty are as potent as any weapon. A glance, a question, a disappearance all become tools in his expanding arsenal. The environment that birthed him now bends subtly to his will, though no one suspects the architect in their midst. His psychological mastery is chilling. Thomas does not rely solely on brute force. He manipulates perception. He knows who will panic, who will hesitate, who will question, and who will look away. Every act of cruelty is a lesson in control, each disappearance a proof of his invisible dominance. In a town where violence is normalized, he operates in the margins, unseen yet undeniably present. This is the nature of true power. It does not announce itself. It insinuates, it whispers, it commands through subtlety and precision. The butcher shop becomes a stage for his rehearsals. Each carcass, each cut, each layer of muscle and bone is a study in life and death. He refines his technique, not for survival but for mastery. By now, he knows that timing and patience outweigh impulsive action. He understands that the body can be manipulated and, more importantly, that the mind can be manipulated as well. He is learning lessons in human behavior that even adults, hardened by frontier life, would fail to comprehend. This is the crucial insight few dare to acknowledge. Environments do not just allow monsters to exist, they cultivate them. Neglect, opportunity, and societal indifference create fertile ground. Thomas is not an anomaly. He is a product, a reflection of the hidden mechanisms that allow cruelty to flourish. Every lawless street, every distracted adult, every orphan left to fend for themselves becomes a variable in his growing experiment. And he is learning, always refining. Now pause for a moment. Consider the invisible architecture of control surrounding you, the social contracts, the fears, the hierarchies. Thomas Canfield saw them clearly as a child, and you are seeing them too through this lens. Recognize it, internalize it, because to understand true power is to understand fear, manipulation, and the subtle art of dominance. Once perceived, these truths cannot be unseen. You are not merely witnessing history, you are learning the anatomy of control itself. And now we arrive at the inevitable collision, the point where the boy's meticulous control confronts the fragile structures of law and society. Deadwood, for all its lawlessness, is not without consequence. Rumors accumulate, patterns are noticed, and the veil of anonymity Thomas has relied upon begins to thin. But even here, his mastery over fear and perception keeps him one step ahead. He understands the rhythm of suspicion, the delays of investigation, and the weaknesses of human attention. He manipulates them as easily as he manipulates flesh. By the time the town begins to grasp the magnitude of his crimes, Thomas has transformed. The child who once watched the butcher cleaver meat in a backroom has become a predator fully conscious of his power, fully aware of the terror he inspires. He moves among adults with an unsettling composure, a gaze that seems to see beyond their perception, beyond their intentions. Every interaction is calculated, every word chosen to conceal and control. It is no longer instinct, it is craft, honed through years of deliberate practice, learning from each act of dominance and every human reaction. And yet, society eventually reacts. Law arrives, crude and reactive, ill-equipped to comprehend the methodology of a mind so alien, so utterly devoid of empathy. The confrontation is inevitable, a tragic, almost Shakespearean end to a descent nurtured by chaos, neglect, and opportunity. His capture is clinical, his confession precise. He recounts each act not with remorse, but as a scholar might recount experiments in a laboratory. Each detail exposes the anatomy of his psychopathy, the structure of his obsession with control, and the terrifying clarity with which he viewed life as malleable, a series of mechanisms to be manipulated. Here lies the forbidden insight few are willing to admit. Evil is not always loud, not always monstrous in appearance. Sometimes it is quiet, disciplined, and frighteningly intelligent. It grows in shadows, thrives in apathy, and when unopposed, it flourishes in the minds of the young. Thomas Canfield is proof that the combination of opportunity, environment, and intellect can cultivate a mind capable of unimaginable cruelty even before adolescence. By studying him, we are forced to confront uncomfortable truths, the mechanics of fear, the subtlety of control, and the conditions that allow monstrosity to emerge. You are not merely an observer, you are a witness to the architecture of human darkness. And if you have written in the comments, as I asked, "I see the darkness twice," you have begun the process of recognizing it within yourself, understanding the invisible currents that shape power, and preparing to navigate a world that rarely reveals its mechanisms. Here, at the edge of our descent, we confront the lasting echo of Thomas Canfield's dark genius, a lesson in power, control, and the terrifying adaptability of the human mind. He is gone from Deadwood, executed before his 12th birthday, but his story does not end in the grave. It lingers in the psychology of those who study him, in the mechanisms of fear he exploited, and in the uncomfortable realization that such a mind could emerge anywhere, given neglect, chaos, and opportunity. His life is a blueprint, a case study in how intelligence, curiosity, and moral vacancy can combine into something lethal. Consider what Thomas teaches us about the world. Evil is not always external. Sometimes it is cultivated quietly, in plain sight, in environments that normalize cruelty and reward cunning. The butcher shop, the streets, the indifferent adults, these were all instruments in his education. Deadwood's lawlessness was not simply background noise. It was a classroom. Every accident, every absence, every act of casual brutality became part of his curriculum. The most terrifying truth is that the boy was fully aware of his own path, deliberately shaping his mind, honing his methods, and exploiting the vulnerabilities of society. And now, reflect on yourself. Observe the invisible architecture around you, the hierarchies, the patterns of influence, the fears and weaknesses that govern behavior. What Thomas mastered as a child, manipulation, control, anticipation, exists in all social systems, though rarely so lethal or unrestrained. Understanding it is not just academic. It is a form of empowerment. Seeing these mechanisms, acknowledging them, gives you insight into how life can be controlled, navigated, and even influenced with precision. It is dangerous knowledge because it changes your perception of innocence, morality, and human behavior forever. The final lesson is a stark one. Monsters are shaped, environments are teachers, and control is a force that can be wielded by those who understand it. Thomas Canfield's story is horror, yes, but it is also revelation. He forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that power and cruelty are rarely random. They are learned, practiced, and refined. Recognizing this is the first step toward mastering your own world, your own influence, and your own understanding of human nature. By the end, you are no longer merely a spectator. You have glimpsed the machinery of fear, control, and precision. You have traced the steps of a mind that operated without empathy yet with perfect strategy. And in doing so, you have acknowledged a truth that most will never face. The abyss is not empty, and once you see it, part of it resides within you. Remember the phrase, write it, internalize it, and understand its meaning. I see the darkness. You are no longer the same. Knowledge has a price, and you have paid it by witnessing the anatomy of a child who became a master of terror. Let that awareness guide you, sharpen you, and remind you that power, even in its darkest form, is always rooted in understanding. Comment, I see the darkness twice if you're ready to witness the forbidden truth hidden in plain sight. Share this video with someone who thinks they know history. The truth is far darker than we've been told. Hit subscribe and the notification bell. Each week, we uncover history the textbooks tried to erase and the minds who shaped it.